And a very happy Wednesday to you at 12:08 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in Culver City.
John, we start with breaking news. This, according to many reports, I'm reading it straight from Nikki Lorenzo's Twitter account, former Vice President Kamala Harris is not running for governor in California in 2026. Here is part of her statement said to Nikki Lorenzo, quote, "In recent months, I have given serious thought to asking the people of California for the privilege to serve as their governor. I love this state, its people, and its promise. It's my home. But after deep reflection, I've decided I will not run for governor in this election."
Okay. Had she run for governor, it would have been crash and burn. And I think at this point, everyone, including her, was aware of that. Yesterday, we heard from former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, who said that he thought it was highly possible if Kamala Harris ran for governor, she would lose, and he all but endorsed Rick Caruso for governor.
Not only that, Rick Caruso went up to San Francisco to meet with Willie Brown in person, and they posed for pictures together while Willie Brown was holding a picture of the state capitol.
At the same time, all of these Democratic Party operatives who know Kamala Harris, who know Willie Brown, were tweeting extremely cryptic things about that photograph with Rick Caruso. Basically going through the history, in polite terms, between Willie Brown and Kamala Harris, saying how dramatic it was that he would say that she might lose or could lose or would lose, and was posting very kind things about a potential rival. Rumors started to swirl around the state of California late last night and early this morning that Kamala Harris would not be running for governor. Then, at 12 noon, right before we signed on the air, my phone went off like a slot machine. News alert from CNN, news alert from Politico, news alert from the LA Times, news alert from the Sacramento Bee. Kamala Harris will not run for governor of California. And this is interesting. I told Randy right before the show started, I said, it's embargoed, it's going to break at noon. Let's go ahead and roll tape on CNN so we can play what CNN had to say about Kamala Harris not running for governor. And what happened, Randy?
Well, I went to roll on CNN. They had their top of the hour update, and Kamala wasn't in it. They've just gotten to it now, but they bumped Kamala for a story about the Federal Reserve and then Epstein.
They did the Federal Reserve and Epstein after the embargo was lifted, and they got to Kamala 11 minutes into the hour. What does that tell you about her stock nationally?
It's broken now. It's been 12, 13 minutes? It's not on Mediaite yet. It's not even on Drudge yet. I believe we're at the point where Kamala Harris is an afterthought.
She is yesterday's news.
Okay, it's on Drudge, but it's not in red, so it's not that exciting.
I'll tell you what I think happened. And I bet you I'm right. I bet you she was planning on running for governor of California, not because she wanted the job, not because she had ideas as to how to fix California's problems, not because she has been thinking about our problems and solutions for some time and feels that she could provide all of the answers to the problems that ail us. I think they commissioned a poll, and they found that she would lose. She would either lose to another Democrat or she would lose to a Republican. Maybe both. I don't know who they polled in terms of potential challengers, because don't forget, the field is not gelled yet. We know who is declared as of now, but there are any number of bold-faced names who could jump into the race. Certainly, there are rumors swirling that Rick Caruso will pass on a run for mayor of Los Angeles and run for governor instead.
Quite frankly,
there's also rumors swirling around Mar-a-Lago that Grant Cardone, who is a rich guy friend of Donald Trump, will also announce that he's running for governor, in which case there would be 3 boldface named Republicans in the race.
That guy will have all the Scientology money behind him.
Well, he's going to have a lot of it, too, because he's a rich guy. And think about this for a second. Think about what this race for governor might look like with Kamala Harris out. First of all, if Grant Cardone jumps in, you will have a rich guy with the support of the President of the United States behind him. So that guy can come in and spend a fortune. If Rick Caruso jumps into the race, Rick Caruso is a literal billionaire who can spend whatever it takes to win, as we learned when he ran for mayor.
He better not hire Ace Smith again.
He spent whatever it took, he just didn't win. And then don't forget about the state's lieutenant governor, Eleni Kounalakis, who is friends with Kamala Harris.
For Californians.
And she is also a member of the 9th richest family in the state of California. Her father is basically the Eli Broad of Sacramento. They can spend whatever they want or whatever they need to get her elected. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe she already has Nancy Pelosi's endorsement and Hillary Clinton's endorsement, which tells you what they thought about Kamala, because they didn't sit it out and wait for her to make a decision. They endorsed very early on.
Well, Pelosi didn't want Kamala to run for president.
No, she didn't. So we could have a race that involves any number of candidates, but 3 billionaires who are going to go nuclear on one another.
Okay, on Eleni's website, it doesn't show that Nancy has endorsed her, but the top one is Hillary Clinton, followed by Barbara Boxer.
Okay, so you have Hillary Clinton and Barbara Boxer. I want to say I saw something that said that Pelosi did endorse her, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That endorsement costs a lot of money.
But back to Kamala for a second. I've told you that I've read a number of books about the last presidential election, the 2024 presidential election, that talked about Joe Biden's senility and the process of getting him out of the race and replacing him with Kamala Harris. One of the things that all of the books say the same thing on is that at no point in the election did the polling indicate that the Democratic ticket was going to win. Now, we know that Joe Biden's numbers were awful, and we know that the Democratic Party came to the conclusion that he was unelectable, and they had to get him out. If they didn't get him out, not only would he lose, but he would cause Democrats down the ballot to lose with him. The collateral damage that would have resulted from Joe Biden staying on the ticket was more than they were willing to accept, so that's why they decided to put a horse's head in his bed. What Pelosi and Schumer and others wanted was they wanted to replace him with an open convention. They wanted to have a convention where they took their top 5 or 6 candidates and they figured out a way to let the delegates vote, and they would end up with a Gretchen Whitmer or a Josh Shapiro or an Andy Bashar or a Gavin Newsom or someone else. Joe didn't want that to happen. He didn't want to be replaced with a circus. If he was going to step down, he wanted Kamala Harris to replace him. And that's why he endorsed her almost immediately after dropping out of the race. And she had the delegates all locked up. Don't forget, the delegates who had a say were delegates who were already pledged to Joe. Joe did her a solid, and that's how she ended up as the Democratic nominee. But at no point in the process, after she became the presumptive Democratic nominee, including after the bounce when she was announced to be the Democratic candidate, and don't forget, back then, the Democrats were jazzed, they were enthusiastic, they were very happy with the fact that she was replacing Joe on the ticket. All of that being said, according to these books, at no point did the private polling say she was going to win. She was going to lose all the way through that election. It wasn't Trump getting shot that caused him to win. It wasn't Trump working at McDonald's or working at the dump truck or the garbage truck or whatever that was, none of that caused Donald Trump to win the election in and of itself. He was ahead the entire way through. The outcome in that election with Joe or Kamala was already predetermined. The only question was, how many swing states would Trump win and what would the margins be? He ended up winning every single swing state. And don't forget, many of those states, which both parties expected to win, weren't even close. In fact, I think states that weren't contested, like New Jersey, were about as close as some of the swing states like Arizona when all the votes were counted. Her performance as a candidate was horrible. And that is not a fact that is lost on Democratic Party donors. That is not a fact that is lost on Democratic Party power brokers. They're aware that she's a horrible candidate. They just needed to get into bed with her, so to speak, because the alternative was Joe. They were stuck in an arranged marriage that they didn't want to be in. But they decided to get involved in that arranged marriage because that was the only way they could survive. That was the only way they wouldn't be blown out of the water. She did better than Joe would have done, but she didn't do good enough to win. And they all recognize that. In theory, she's interested in federal issues. She cares about abortion. She really dislikes Donald Trump. She was participating in America's foreign policy when she was the vice president, so she cares about that. In theory, she cares about federal issues, and she still couldn't give coherent answers to any questions about any of those subjects. She has never expressed an interest at all in California issues. In fact, as the former Attorney General of California and the former District Attorney of San Francisco, when she was asked at her polling place how she was voting on Prop 36, she wouldn't say. She said, "I'll tell you later," meaning after we find out if it passed or not. And she never followed up. She never answered the question. She always ignored it whenever anyone asked her about Prop 36. Well, you want to be governor of California and you don't care about any California issues at all, and you won't even publicly give an opinion on some of the biggest issues on the ballot, but you think California voters should trust you to be the CEO of the state? That doesn't sound like a good idea. And again, it's not just Republicans that she offended. If you're the Democratic Party and you realize that California is a basket case right now, you're not thinking that you're going to lose the seat to a Republican. You're thinking, I've got 1,000,001 different Democrats to choose from. Why would I go with this turkey who I know is going to be a disaster? Why should we give this seat to someone who doesn't even want it, who's not going to be good at the job? And it's not going to cause the Democrats to lose elections statewide. But if you put a complete train wreck in as governor and you expect to win local offices, you expect your ballot propositions to pass, you expect maybe a potential candidate for higher office to come out of that office, guess what? You're not going to get that with her. She's going to be a problem from day one. She's going to be the weak sister that everyone is going to have to do the heavy lifting for, and she's not going to be grateful for any of it. Why in the world would you get into bed with her if you have other alternatives? And my guess is she became aware of this. Either donors who she expected to be in her corner have told her that they are going to support another candidate, or she has polling that suggests that she would lose the election. I don't know what happened privately, but I bet you both of those things did occur. Because Kamala Harris is a deeply ambitious person. The one thing that she has been consistent on is her ambition. And if you have the opportunity to be the governor of the largest state in the union, which would, in theory, position you to run for president of the United States, why wouldn't you take it even if you don't care about the job? I don't think she stepped out of this race willingly. I think she stepped out of this race to avoid the humiliation that would come with a defeat. And she thought the odds were high enough that she would lose this election that she didn't even want to take the risk. So here's our question to you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Do you think Kamala Harris opted not to run for governor of California because she thought she would lose? I think that's the reason. What say you? At 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you missed yesterday's show and you want to go back and find out what you missed out on, that's easy to do.
You missed a hell of a lot of great calls on tagging, because we talked about it all show long. Search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You could download all the episodes. You could do what George Gascon does to himself in the middle of the night.
Do a Google on YouTube.
You can get the free KABC app. You can get the free KSFO app. Easiest way to listen live to these radio stations and download all the podcasts.
Kamala Harris says she's not running for governor of California. She's decided to take a pass. What say you? At 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Well, apparently we have a computer glitch at the radio stations and the telephone's not working.
Somebody cut the string in between the two cans.
Yeah, I think the computers are so old, the computers think it's Y2K.
Okay, now we're resetting the home phone system, so I don't even think we can use the contest line.
Well, between noon and 3 is the best time to figure all this out.
As soon as the phones are back up, I'll let you know.
All right. Let's go back to the breaking news, where Kamala Harris announced that she is not running for governor here in the state of California. A lot of people are already making the comparison between her and Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon lost the presidency in 1960 to John F. Kennedy. That was the election where it was decided by a hair, and the Democrats probably cheated to win. That was back when the mob was stuffing ballot boxes in the state of Illinois, and there was all kinds of funny business going on that was documented. Nixon knew he essentially lost in a statistical tie and was a relatively young politician. He was very ambitious. He wanted to stay in the ball game, but once you've been vice president, once you've been a major party nominee, and you went down in defeat, it's hard to find something that you can run for that would be at parity with what you had before. Don't forget, at that moment in time, he was already a U.S. Senator from California. He was already a congressman from California. He had done it all. So if he were to go back to California and run for the U.S. Senate or run for a House seat, people would look at that as being a massive step or two backwards in his career. That's not a good look. You can't do that. But back then, California was still a relatively red state. Don't forget, it's a state that had elected Richard Nixon over and over and over again in various capacities. So he decided, as a placeholder, it would be good to run for governor of California. And he ran against Pat Brown. You talk to people who knew Dick Nixon back then or talked to him in subsequent years about that race, and Nixon basically told them all the same thing. Basically, he wanted to be governor of California, so he had a high-profile place to land. He didn't care about any of the issues that California governors have to deal with, which back then included water, deals with the Indian tribes, the state budget, providing the infrastructure for, at that time, a growing state. People were moving to California from all over the country, all over the world. And we were building universities. We were building our water system. We were building basically the infrastructure that we are currently using. And Nixon didn't care about any of that. He did the reading because he knew he had to, but it wasn't as if he had a passion for it. It wasn't as if he'd been thinking about it for a long time. It wasn't as if he had any novel ideas. He just wanted the office because it looked good on a ballot to run for president at some point in the future. Maybe not against Kennedy in 64, maybe later on in 68. And then a funny thing happened. A job that he thought he would waltz into, he ended up losing to a Democrat. Now, I know saying a Republican losing to a Democrat in a statewide race in California doesn't sound like anything earth-shattering. But back then, that would be like a Democrat losing to a Republican today. The Republican in a statewide race in California in the 1950s and 60s was the heavy favorite. That's just the way it was. We came into the Union as a Republican state, and we stayed that way for a very long time. But he ended up losing, in part because his heart just wasn't in the race. That's when he went in the wilderness. That's when he moved to New York. He moved to San Clemente. He stayed out of the limelight for a while, and the world changed dramatically. First of all, Kennedy got shot, so Lyndon Johnson became the president, beat Barry Goldwater in a landslide in 64, and then became deeply unpopular because of the Vietnamese War. Well, you have a once popular, now unpopular incumbent who many in his own party didn't even want him in the race, and Nixon saw an opportunity. And he decided, all right, this is my chance. The manager has gone to the mound, and they're calling in the left-hander from the bullpen, and now is my chance. This is my opportunity to get back in the game. And what happened? He won the election, and he won re-election, and then we all know what happened after that. But the point is that back then in the United States, you could lose a couple of big high-profile elections in a row, and you still had viability. People had more of an attention span back then. People didn't regard you as a loser. They didn't look at you and see someone who was not viable. Right now, the world doesn't operate like that. People don't have attention spans. You can be the most famous person in the world for a moment in time, and a couple of weeks later, it's like, who are you? Think about how that works with these big media stories. Think about someone who was in the eye of the storm. Everyone knew who they were for a period of time, and then poof, they just disappear. And then you say to yourself, yeah, I think I know who that person was. Think about Rachel Dolezal. You remember her? She was the woman from Spokane, Washington, who was the white woman who lived as a black woman and then became the president of the NAACP. And that story was the lead story on every newscast in the nation. Network, local, cable, radio, didn't matter. Everyone was doing that story. And now, when you mention her name, no one knows what you're talking about.
Except for you, because you watched her cooking show.
I did. Yes, never made the Food Network, but she was a hit on YouTube. Jussie Smollett. He was the biggest thing in the world when that went down. If he were to walk down the street, do you think you'd recognize him? I probably wouldn't, and I work in news. If you're Kamala Harris, you may be very famous now, and you certainly were very famous during the campaign, but do you think people are going to remember you years from now? And do you think they're going to remember you with warm feelings? I doubt it. Look at these former vice presidents that ended up running for office. Dan Quayle. How'd that work out? Mike Pence just ran for president. Couldn't win a state. Yet Kamala Harris thinks that she has viability in the future to be president. Well, I don't think she has viability to be president now. If she runs for governor and loses, it's over. whatever it is that she wanted to do is not going to happen. And right now, I guess she still has opportunity to do certain things. She could be a president of a university. She could be on a corporate board of directors. She could, in theory, be put on the Supreme Court. There are a number of roles that are still available to her. But you run and you lose for California governor in a race where you start out as the favorite, you're going to be parking cars at the DoubleTree by the airport. And that's it. All right. Do we have the phone lines back up and working?
The phone lines are up. Let's go. Let's open up those phones.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. If you want to react to Kamala Harris opting against running for governor of California, we'd love to hear from you at 800-222-5222. 1-800-222-5222. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. The breaking news this afternoon is that the former vice president, Kamala Harris, has announced that she will not be running for governor of California in 2026. Now it's your opportunity to weigh in, I hope, at 800-222-5222. 1-800-222-5222. Let's begin with Greg in Napa. Greg, hello.
Yeah, hey, I agree with everything you said. I think it's political suicide. If she runs and loses, then she's known as a double loser and probably couldn't even get a job flipping hamburgers at McDonald's after that. So totally agree with you. On a separate issue, and what you were talking about, you need someone that's, notoriety. What about Dwayne Johnson, The Rock? Kind of like Arnold, kind of like Reagan, a movie star, has some pizzazz, a real good attention getter. What do you think the odds of that would be?
What's funny about him was I thought at one point in time that he would run for something because he was the biggest thing in the world for a period of time.
Yep.
In pro wrestling, and then he moved over to the movies and was a big box office lead over in the movies, and was just a likable guy who could do well in the talk shows and certainly had a presence on social media and got involved in politics. He spoke in front of the Republican National Convention one year, but then he kind of withdrew from politics. Now, I don't know if he got any blowback from that, and people told him, oh, it's going to hurt your brand as a movie star, so don't do it. And he just kind of withdrew. And then I think he came out at a later point in time and endorsed Obama and endorsed, I want to say, Hillary Clinton over Trump. And then you just stopped hearing from him about politics again entirely. So I don't know if he just lost interest or his advisors are giving him mixed signals, whatever the case may be. I also do know this. His family back in America's Samoa are Republican politicians. I know his dad was a pro wrestler, but he's got any number of people in his family who are in the pro wrestling world. But the ones that stuck around in American Samoa are Republican politicians. I kind of feel like if he was going to get involved in politics and put his name on a ballot, he would have done it by now. And he was a bigger star back then than he is right now. So I think he may have missed his window.
Ouch. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the call, sir. Let's go to Tim in Los Angeles. Tim, hello.
Yes. Hi, John. Interesting thing I feel about Harris is I think if she ran, she would really help the Republicans in the general election for greater turnout, and that would help on, down ballot races, maybe Assembly, Senate, some congressional races that are going to be awfully close. I just think she would have really generated more enthusiasm for Republican or conservative-leaning voters to turn out in a midterm election. The other thing I was wondering what you might think about this, given her really lack of interest in California issues, and she only saw this as a stepping stone, and she got elected, given her kind of past performance and what you might project how she would perform as governor, do you think she could end up being subject to a recall at some point just for being sort of incompetent?
Well, I think they would try to recall her. Whether or not they were successful remains to be seen. I seriously doubt it. But think about this. How you win is also important. In a heavily Democratic state, if she just limps across the finish line and wins by a few points, like that governor in New York, Kathy Hochul, that puts you in a very weak position to start your term. And just try to visualize what kind of candidate she would have made for governor of California. Think about when she ran for president, and she was sitting on the set of The View, and Sunny Hostin asked her what she would do differently than Joe Biden. And she had no answer to that question. That had to be a question that she anticipated getting. That had to be a question where they had certainly kicked around some potential answers, her and her advisors. She had nothing to say. If you can't answer that question, what do you think she would say if she's sitting across a table from Alex Michelson or Ashley Zavala and they say, what are you going to do to fix California's insurance crisis? She would have nothing to say. And it wouldn't just be for that question. What do you think she would say about the homeless problem? What do you think she would say about the budget? What do you think she would say about fire mitigation? She would have zero coherent answers to any of those questions. And yeah, you can make up for it by just getting Team Blue to vote for the blue candidate. But how can you defend her? How can you go out there and say, oh, she's the best person for this job? It would have been embarrassing for her, and it would have been embarrassing for all of her supporters.
Well, I think your points are very well taken. I was just thinking that a lot of Republicans might have wished she'd run and be a horrible candidate and would help them in the midterms in California.
I think you're right. She would have reminded everyone why they voted for Donald Trump. She would have attracted negative attention every single day that would have made the national news. And if you're running for office in Michigan or Nevada or Arizona and people are asking you about something stupid Kamala Harris said that particular day, that's like an anvil tied around your waist. They would have all hated it. Thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it. Let's go to Dale in Long Beach. Dale, hello.
Hello, John. She could run for president in about 8 years from now and have a much better chance. But I'm glad she's not the governor. The nightmare for California is over. She won't be running around with the governor's entourage campaigning for the office of presidency. But I was looking up who's the front runner here. You know, you have the general election where only the two top vote getters go to the general election. That could be two Democrats. In my opinion, that's who it'll be. So right now it's Jose Baccaria, as Joe Biden would say. And I was going to ask you about Toni Atkins. She seems to have the credentials. I don't know if it's her time or not.
Well, here's the problem. If you're a state senator, and she was a state senator before she became a candidate for governor, my guess is most people don't know who you are in your own district. If you're running for governor, no one statewide knows who the president pro tem of the California Senate is. Back in the old days, we did. Everyone knew who Willie Brown was. Everyone knew who Jess Unruh was. Everyone knew who any number of those guys were. But now it's not the case. Now, many of them are just totally anonymous, even the ones in leadership. In Sacramento, everyone knew who she was because the lobbyists and the members of the legislature, they all needed things from her. But in terms of regular people outside of that world, if she walked down Hollywood Boulevard, out of the first 100 people that came across her, I doubt one person would know who Toni Atkins was. Could be wrong, but you never know. All right, Kamala Harris announces she's not running for governor. Now it's your opportunity to weigh in at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Your calls coming up right here on The John Phillips Show.